Imagine your biggest secret is silently sewing traditional dolls, hidden from the world. One day, the most popular girl in school discovers it, but instead of making fun of you, she asks for something impossible, to turn her into her waifu in real life. Thus begins a race against the clock, with burning needles, sleepless nights, and cosplay outfits that break the internet. But with every stitch, their hearts grow closer, and jealous rivals begin to appear, all to get the perfect photo. Will this shy craftsman be able to shine in the spotlight, or will he crumble under the pressure? Stay tuned, because when the fireworks go off, a single whispered word could change everything. Let's discover together how a single thread can unite two hearts. The anime begins by introducing us to the protagonist, Wakana Gojo, when he was just a child with his grandfather, watching in fascination at the Hina dolls he had made for him. His grandfather, seeing his deep admiration for his work, assures him that if he practices a lot, one day he could create his own Hina dolls. So, Wakana spent days and days making Hina dolls, as he considered it something fantastic. Until one day, Nobara, whom he considered a very close friend, traumatized him by shouting in his face that his love for dolls was disgusting because he is a boy. We can then see that even after several years, Wakana remains passionate about Hina dolls. Although, while having breakfast with his grandfather, he confesses to feeling sad because he still wasn't as good as him, as he isn't capable of making faces as perfect as his. His grandfather, seeing him so worried, asks him to calm down a bit because he is still a student, and reminds him that he has been in this business for 48 years. He then asks if he managed to make any friends in high school. This question made Wakana very nervous, and he assures him that he did, but they don't hang out much because they are all in different school clubs. However, a few minutes later, we discover that the protagonist told his grandfather a terrible lie, as he doesn't have a single friend in high school. Even so, Wakana considers it a sacrifice he is willing to pay, because his dream is to become a doll maker. Furthermore, due to his strange hobby, it's extremely difficult to find someone with similar interests, which makes him think he would just be a nuisance to other people. Clearly, just as Nobara had let him know a long time ago, his thoughts were suddenly interrupted by Marin, who hit her head against Wakana's desk. Subsequently, she made the protagonist very nervous when she started behaving differently from what he was clearly used to, as Marin doesn't seem to consider him an annoying person. In fact, she even noticed a small stain our boy has on his arm. But he, very nervous and trying to prevent her from inquiring about his hobby, quickly pulled his arm away from her sight while assuring her that there was nothing there. After Marin's departure, the blushing protagonist was left staring at the young woman with whom he had spoken for the first time, because he is aware that they both live in opposite worlds, as she is always cheerful and has many friends. Something Wakana longed to experience, although he believes it will be impossible. Later, when class is ended, we see Wakana cleaning the classroom after taking the place of one of his classmates, who were in a great hurry because they were clearly late for work. While the protagonist was doing the task, he was surprised when he suddenly saw Marin enter the classroom with the intention of also tidying up the room. When she noticed his piercing gaze, she reveals that this week it was her turn to clean the classroom. She also asks where the others are, but he replies that they have already left because they have to work. And this clearly caught Marin's attention, who can't believe they left all the dirty work to the protagonist. So, somewhat angry, she asks him if it doesn't bother him that the others do this. And he confesses to Wakana that it's just a little, although he couldn't tell them because he doesn't want to be a nuisance to others. And besides, everyone counts on him to do these things. She, with a very intense look, assures him that he is very mistaken. Nobody is counting on him, they are just using him as their servant. Because of this, before leaving, she advises him not to keep accepting what he doesn't like, and even tells him that he has to say what he feels so he can help himself, or else it will lead to his own destruction. A few days later, we observe that while Wakana is working on making dolls, he is still thinking about Marin's words, because she is really right, as he always hides his true feelings. Suddenly, his grandfather's old sewing machine gives out because it stopped working. Therefore, the next day, Wakana heads to the sewing club room to continue working on his doll project. However, when he least expects it, Marin appears, which made him extremely nervous, to the point that he clearly dropped his most precious creation. But before Marin's watchful eyes, he dived to the floor as if his life depended on it, and managed to prevent the doll from being destroyed, although while doing so, he spoke to the doll as if it were alive. Because of this, Marin, somewhat startled by the situation, confesses her surprise that he knows how to use a sewing machine, and completely ignored the strange situation of Wakana talking to his dolls. The protagonist reveals that he knows how to use the machine because his family are doll makers, and they taught him from a very young age how the tools work. Marin, amazed, asks for permission to see his Hina doll, which she finds fantastic because its eyes are sparkling. Wakana can't believe what he is hearing because it is the first time someone has praised his work and what he loves to do so much. Next, Marin, upon discovering that he knows how to sew clothes, begins to undress in front of the protagonist, who doesn't know how to react to what is happening. A little embarrassed, she asks him to turn around for a moment, and after putting on the dress she was working on, she asks for his opinion on whether she was able to replicate her dress for cosplay. Our boy, as expected, has no idea how to interact with a woman and, to Marin's surprise, told her that her dress was horrible because it looks nothing like the one in the photo she showed him. Then, meticulously examining the outfit, he details everything that is clearly imperfect, which obviously made Marin cry as she had put a lot of effort into making it. But when Wakana realized this, he began to apologize for crossing the line and asks her how much money he will have to pay her to forgive him. Surprised, she demands that he stop being silly, as she isn't really angry. On the contrary, she thinks it was a blessing to discover his skills. Subsequently, she confesses that she wishes with all her heart to be able to cosplay as her favorite characters. For that very reason, she begs him to make her some outfits, because she can't do much on her own, and she really wants to become her favorite character, named Shizuku. Given this situation, and after remembering all the nice things she had said to him, the protagonist accepted her request without hesitation, although he warns her that he has never made normal-sized clothes, so he will do his best to help her. Marin burst with happiness upon hearing him, which even made her cry with joy while the protagonist just watched her, happy to be able to help. Minutes later, with no time to waste, Wakana got down to business, using a book Marin lent him as a reference, as it provides instructions on how to make cosplay costumes. And after reading a little, the protagonist doesn't understand how Marin made such an ugly costume, even with the step-by-step instructions on how to make Shizuku's outfit in her possession. Even so, he set all this aside to tell Marin that the first step before going shopping for materials will be to take her measurements, although since it's getting too late, he suggests they do it on Monday after class. Therefore, with a friendly smile, Marin says goodbye to the protagonist and tells him they will see each other in a few days. The next day, we see that Marin couldn't contain her excitement to become Shizuku until Monday and decided to visit the Gojo doll shop, where she was received by Wakana, who was shocked to see that she had managed to find his house. Because of this, when she asks to come in, our very nervous boy tells her that he can't let her in, though Marin cared little, and after giving him the gift, she headed to his room. And while she seems very interested in the protagonist's work tools, Wakana, for his part, can't help but observe Marin's body, as her clothes are very provocative. This makes him extremely nervous, with the avalanche of intrusive thoughts flooding his mind. In other words, we can say the protagonist got a little hot and bothered, so he does his best to calm his nerves. Suddenly, Marin, realizing that he is clearly not paying attention to her, shouts and asks if they are going to take her measurements or not. Wakana, somewhat embarrassed, suggests that she'd better find someone else to do it, because the book she lent him says that to take the measurements, she has to be in her underwear. Contrary to what the protagonist believed, Marin assures him that this will not be a problem and quickly begins to take off her clothes while showing him that she put on a swimsuit because she was aware of what taking her body measurements would entail. She also confesses that she thought of him and for this reason made this decision because she didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable. Wakana, in this situation, doesn't know what to say because he thinks the swimsuit she chose is even more provocative than if she had worn underwear. But Marin, unaware of what is happening, asks him if he is okay. Because of this, the very worried protagonist demands that she not touch him, as it is not a good moment. Minutes later, after managing to calm down a bit, the protagonist prepares to take Marin's measurements, although as he gets closer, his hands begin to tremble, which prevents him from concentrating. Therefore, he asks his new friend to turn around because he thought it would be easier. But boy, was he wrong, because things got more complicated. Because of this, he asks Marin if she isn't embarrassed to show herself in a swimsuit when they are completely alone. She assures him that she isn't. To become Shizuku, she has to do everything the book she lent him says. Her words made Wakana realize that he must stop being silly and not have impure thoughts because that could ruin Marin's dream. Thanks to this, we can see that the protagonist brought out all his skills and managed to take his friend's measurements without a hint of hesitation. However, all this tranquility disappears when Marin lay down on our boy's bed so he could measure her feet. And although Wakana wanted to bring a chair to make her comfortable, she, being a bit provocative, insists that he can do it while she is sitting on his bed. The protagonist, very nervous about the view he has of Marin, had no choice but to follow her orders and take her feet measurements. And after finishing this task, Wakana breathes a sigh of relief, as he will not have to expose himself to more tense situations. But to his surprise, Marin begs him to take her bust measurements. As expected, he refuses to do so. Because of this, she tells him that he is the only person who can do it and asks him to hurry because she is starting to feel tired. Although in this situation, Wakana tries not to have intrusive thoughts, it is something extremely difficult when he has Marin's succulent breasts right in front of his eyes. Finally, after long hours of work, the two manage to finish taking Marin's exact measurements. Next, we see that Wakana had to return to class after a rather eventful weekend, because not only did he have Marin in a swimsuit in his room all day Saturday, but after thinking about her, he apparently had a rather fun Sunday alone. Therefore, when he runs into her at school, he feels so much shame that he doesn't even know how to look her in the eye. Although Marin, as usual, makes sure their conversations are more pleasant. Suddenly, the two were interrupted by Marin's friend named Noah, who, upon seeing them talking so confidently, asks if she can join them. To Wakana's surprise, not only did Noah approach, but the rest of Marin's friends did too, because it would be the first time they could talk to him. After a brief group chat, the girls leave because otherwise they will be late for class. After their departure, Wakana can't believe what he is seeing because he would never expect Marin to talk to him at school as well. Clearly, this made him very, very happy. However, after overhearing some girls talking about how strange it would be for Marin to date a guy like him, he decided to avoid contact with her, who, for her part, spent the entire day trying to meet up with the protagonist as she noticed he was avoiding her. But hours later, when Wakana thought he had achieved his goal, he was intercepted by Marin before he left school. She, pretending that nothing is wrong, invites him to go shopping to help her select the perfect materials for her costume. The protagonist, realizing that everyone is looking at him strangely, replies that he can't accompany her and runs away from the place to hide, hoping she won't find him. But before he could even think of how to apologize, Marin was already by his side. Because of this, she scolds him for running away and demands an explanation as to why he is really avoiding her. He, very embarrassed, confesses that he doesn't want others to think she knows him because he thinks it will affect her popularity, which means it would be best if they are not together in public. Although, as expected, Marin tells him to stop talking nonsense, as the truth is that they are friends. Her words left the protagonist in shock, who, for a moment, was very happy, only to remember hearing some people say that they might be dating, so he insists that it would be best if they didn't talk in public. Marin, upon hearing him, surprised the protagonist by telling him that in that case, they should probably start dating. Consumed by nerves, he tells her no, although she laughingly confesses that she was just joking, and then took his hand so they could go shopping together at a store specializing in all things cosplay. Upon arrival, our boy shows Marin the sketches of her costume that he drew from 3 different angles. While she tries to process the fantastic drawing, he, for his part, lists the things they are going to need. Subsequently, Marin confesses that she saved a lot of money for this moment. That's why she wants them to start buying the necessary things as soon as possible, without worrying about the cost. After a few hours of shopping for the costume, she asks the protagonist that their next stop be Swallowtail, a place where amazing wigs are made. There, Wakana surprised Marin with everything he knows about Shizuku, as he even thinks he now knows more than she does. Thus, the protagonist was able to find both the right color and length to recreate her favorite character. After getting the necessary items for the exterior of the costume, Marin tells the protagonist that it's now time to buy stockings and a garter belt. Minutes later, we can see Wakana waiting very nervously for Marin while she tries on the lingerie. Because of this, the protagonist asks if he can really wait for her outside the fitting room, because he is sure that the rest of the customers will not like a man being there. But she asks him to relax, because it is totally normal for couples to go to this type of store. Suddenly, the protagonist is left speechless when she showed him that the garter belt looked fascinating on her. He, very worried, demands that she cover up because he is seeing her underwear. And Marin, very happy with a mischievous smile, confesses that she had to thank him somehow for accompanying her. Finally, after a long day of shopping, the two get ready to go home after having dinner. Along the way, Marin tells the protagonist about a special event in 2 weeks where she can show off her fantastic costume. She also reveals that cosplay is very popular on social media, which amazed the protagonist, who had not realized the implications of making a good costume for his friend, as she is very eager to show the Shizuku costume to the whole world, just like the many famous cosplayers she admires. This will be a real challenge because they only have 2 weeks to perfect this costume. A few hours later, upon arriving home, the protagonist's grandfather confesses he is surprised that he arrived so late. and he tells him that he was just shopping with a friend, although he accidentally dropped the bag containing parts of Marin's costume. His grandfather, seeing that he bought a pair of charming stockings, was so astonished that he clearly fell backward onto the floor. Therefore, the old man ended up receiving medical attention at the hospital, from which, after being treated, he left with Wakana to his other granddaughter's house, Miori, as she lives closer to the hospital and her parents can take care of him during the 2 weeks of rest he was prescribed. 2 days later, we see Wakana telling Marin what happened with his grandfather, to which she, very sorry, responds that now she understands why he had missed class. Furthermore, she cheerfully assures him that if she can help him with anything, he should not hesitate to tell her, because believe it or not, she is a very good cook. Our boy, still worried about his grandfather's health, assures her that it is not necessary. For that very reason, Marin asks him to exchange cell phone numbers in this case, so they can keep in touch in case of an emergency. Later, we see that Wakana is very worried because it's been 2 days since he's been able to sew Marin's costume, who, for her part, reveals that she brought the wig already cut. Subsequently, upon seeing the school's notice board, Marin laments that in a week she will have to take exams. Upon hearing her, the protagonist became even more stressed, because now he not only has his friend's costume pending, but he also has to study and visit his grandfather for the next few days. Marin, noticing his worried expression, asks him if he's okay, to which he replied yes, while apologizing for worrying her, although deep down he knows very well that all this is starting to look pretty bad. A few hours later, if things were already looking bad for Wakana, the situation got even worse, because on top of everything he has to do, he must also handle the people who scheduled visits to see his grandfather's workshop. So, from the next day on, our boy did everything humanly possible to fulfill all his obligations, which caused him to end up sick on the floor. And because of not sleeping well, he can't even think clearly. However, instead of worrying about his health, what pains him the most is not having been able to make progress on Marin's costume, as he knows very well how much she was looking forward to it. Subsequently, remembering his grandfather's words, he begins to think that perhaps his calling isn't making dolls, because he has gone several days without touching his brushes. And if his words were true, he most likely is no longer fit to do what he loves most. In the end, all these thoughts about his future and how he is going to disappoint his friend made our boy collapse, who regrets being a loser because he always leaves things half done. But while he was crying, he remembered his grandfather once, telling him that he painted dolls every day of his life because he loves seeing the happy faces of his customers, which in turn helps him get through the tough days. This greatly motivated Wakana, who thought of all the smiles Marin had given him. That's why he decided to stand up and keep striving to fulfill his promise. Thanks to this, a few days later, he was able to present his masterpiece to Marin, who can't believe how fantastic her Shizuku costume looks. The protagonist, for his part, confesses that he feels great joy for having finished it in time for her to wear it at the event she so wants to attend. She, surprised, reveals that there was actually no need to finish it for this specific day. A little embarrassed and aware that there was a misunderstanding, she apologizes for causing him so much trouble, as she had no idea how long it takes to make a dress. Besides, cosplay events are held quite frequently. Because of this, she intended to wait for him to finish it at his own pace and then wear it at those events. Wakana, still with a tired face from not sleeping well for days, fell to the floor, not believing what he was hearing. But when she was very worried about him, our boy actually assures her that he feels relieved now because he thought he wouldn't be able to finish the costume on time. However, Marin, crying, confesses that she feels very sorry because due to her, he didn't even have time to visit his grandfather. That's why she apologizes again, as she feels she should have realized all the effort this boy was making for her. He, somewhat embarrassed, assures her that it was actually all his fault because even after exchanging numbers, he didn't have the courage to ask her when she really needed the costume. But as she continues to cry, the protagonist has the brilliant idea of asking her to try on the costume. This would help him see if he still needs to modify anything. Thanks to this, Marin's tears turned into a pleasant smile as she confesses to the protagonist that even without trying on the dress, she loves how it turned out. Subsequently, we observe Marin, with the great help of the protagonist, starting to dress up as Shizuku because he even knows about makeup, which is a great help at this moment. After long minutes where Wakana treated Marin as if she were one of his dolls, we can see that the result of the protagonist's work is spectacular because Marin looks more like Shizuku than Shizuku herself. As expected, she is very happy with the result of her costume, because everything fits perfectly thanks to him taking every measurement of her body. Therefore, Marin can't contain her excitement and begs Wakana to take a picture of her. Although, upon doing so, Wakana was not very happy with the result. Because of this, he suggests that instead of posing as herself, she should pose as closely as possible to her character. Marin decided to accept our boy's advice and quickly showed what she is capable of. Next, fascinated with all the photos he took, she created a social media account and started uploading cosplayer content. Furthermore, she surprised Wakana by inviting him to tomorrow's event, as she wishes to show off her costume alongside the creator himself. And since the protagonist is unable to refuse what she asks, we can observe that the next day both attended the cosplay event, where our boy confesses to Marin that he feels a little embarrassed because he realized that most cosplayers are women, and that apparently everyone is staring at him. She, after putting aside her excitement to debut as a cosplayer, tells him that he is right because she thinks that maybe everyone is looking at her because of the fascinating costume she is wearing. Wakana replies that maybe everyone is looking at him, strangely because he shouldn't be at this event without a costume, but Marin assures him that this is not true. Still, since he feels very nervous, she asks him to go to the plaza upstairs because there were photographers and other men there. However, upon arriving at this place, Marin caught the attention of all the photographers in the area, who line up waiting for their turn to take some photos of the beauty before their eyes. Meanwhile, Wakana looks around and realizes that at this event, no one judges another's appearance or tastes because everyone is dressed up as their favorite characters regardless of gender. He then looks at Marin and becomes very happy to see her having fun wearing the costume, although he feels sad that now that he has fulfilled his promise, they will most likely stop spending so much time together. Something he considers very painful, because she was his first friend who allowed him to discover new things and also have fun when they were together. Suddenly, Marin approached him to warn him that she is about to be naked because she feels her chest is about to burst. Our desperate boy asks her what she is talking about, and she reveals that upon realizing that Shizuku is a character with a large bust, she decided to use 2 silicone bra inserts to make them a similar size. Wakana, surprised, tells her that this was a terrible mistake because the costume is custom made for her body, which explains why she now feels like her chest is about to break. But Marin assures him that this is not the worst part. She also has a terrible problem with her wig because it is soaked in sweat, as the costume makes her extremely hot. Therefore, very scared, she confesses that she feels like she is going to die. Upon hearing her, the protagonist suggests that it's best for them to go to a cooler place while apologizing, because it's all his fault for choosing such a thick fabric. Minutes later, we can see that upon reaching the air-conditioned place, our boy, intending to help his friend, bought her some cold cloths to lower her temperature. However, while Marin complains that she doesn't even sweat this much in gym class, the protagonist can't stop staring at her giant, sweaty breasts. Then, to avoid looking like a pervert, he starts looking for information on how to lower body temperature, but what a surprise he got when one of the tips was to take off one's underwear and get naked. She, realizing that this is the fastest way to lower her temperature, asks Wakana to lower the zipper of her costume, which obviously surprised the protagonist, who begs her to at least go to the dressing room before doing it. But remembering that Marin can't even move, he had no choice but to help her. However, as he started to wipe the sweat from his friend's back with cold cloths, he began to get very nervous because of the sounds of pleasure she emits as she feels Wakana placing the cold cloths on her back. Later, Marin tells our boy that it's time to go home, though she needs to pass by the plaza one more time because she left a fan waiting to take a picture. Later, during the trip back home, Wakana confesses to his friend that he had a lot of fun with her. Marin, very happy, thanked him for all his help. Although when the protagonist thought this would be the end of their days together, she asks him what the next costume will be because she has a list of 50 favorite characters she wants to make. And although the protagonist tries to hide his happiness, Marin managed to perceive that he is very cheerful, so she asks him why. He, a bit nervous, confesses that it's because he considers it an honor to work with her, even though he is a novice in the art of making cosplay costumes. Minutes later, while she talks about how much fun she had, the protagonist starts to fall asleep due to his exhaustion, though before closing his eyes, he assures Marin that she looked beautiful. Upon hearing him, she remembered a conversation they had where Wakana told her that he only uses that adjective for something special and that he can't say it if he doesn't mean it with all his heart. This clearly took her by surprise, and she was left blushing, unable to respond. The next day, after leaving school, they both set out to perform the corresponding maintenance on Marin's wig. For this, they follow the instructions in the cosplay book she owns. However, Marin, far from forgetting what Wakana told her before falling asleep, can't help but get nervous every time she looks him in the eye. A few hours later, we see the protagonist's grandfather return home. But as soon as he enters, he hurts his back again when he sees Wakana holding a rather provocative dress, and that there was a young lady with him. Faced with this situation, the protagonist and Marin had to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. And after understanding what was happening between them, the grandfather apologized to Marin for yelling when he saw her. He then confesses to his grandson that the costume he sewed is impressive, although Wakana assures him that it can still be improved a lot. So, under Marin's watchful gaze, both the protagonist and his grandfather begin to inspect the areas for improvement on the Shizuku costume. This caused Marin to observe them both with great admiration, especially the protagonist, whom she has just realized she is clearly in love with. Because of this, she tries not to make sounds of excitement as she thinks about how adorable Wakana looks with his grandfather, which makes her love him even more. But as she wonders what on earth she should do, her stomach made a startling noise that amazed both Wakana's grandfather and him, who asks her if she is hungry. Embarrassed, she doesn't know how to react, but seeing that they didn't pay much attention to the situation and just invited her to eat with them, she became very happy. During the meal, Marin was very surprised to discover that the protagonist is very good at cooking. Wakana assures her that it's really not a big deal, and that he only cooks because his parents aren't around. She reveals that the same thing happens to her because her mother died a long time ago from an illness, and her father was transferred for work when she had just started high school, which caused her to have to live alone from a young age. Although neither the protagonist nor his grandfather said it, they both agree that they feel very sorry for her because she had to grow up very, very quickly. But what made them feel the most pity was discovering the food she consumes daily, as her diet is basically based on yogurt and frozen food from the convenience store. Given this situation, the protagonist's grandfather suggests that she should come over to eat at their house more often. A few days later, we can see a torrential rain falling over the city, which annoyed the protagonist's grandfather because it started raining just when he had to leave the house. Suddenly, he notices that a young girl wearing his grandson's school uniform is soaked in the rain. And even though Wakana wasn't home yet, he still offered her a place to take shelter and take a bath, because he considers it a gesture of kindness, as she is a friend of his grandson. Minutes later, Wakana returned home. His grandfather had to step out for a moment and tells him to give something to drink to his friend, who is taking a bath because she was soaked. Our surprised boy wonders who he could have let in because his only friend told him she had to work today. Therefore, worried that someone might be trying to rob them, he goes to the bathroom to find out who it is. However, upon opening the door, he found a naked, pink-haired girl, who got a big scare upon seeing him, causing her to slip and fall, allowing the protagonist to see her completely naked body. After an embarrassing first encounter, while the young girl tries to have a drink, she reveals to the protagonist that she came to his home because she heard he makes costumes. He, very happy, thinks she is a fan of the dolls his grandfather makes, and now understands why he let her into his home, thinking she was a friend of his. Because of this, he asks for her name, to which she introduces herself as Sajuna Inui, a second year at Sarukanamiya High School. Her answer astonished the protagonist because he discovered that she is not a child and is even older than him. Still, he tells her that if she wishes, she can see the clothes she so desires right at this moment. Therefore, Inui, very excited, decides to accompany him, although she was terribly disappointed to see that it was actually doll clothes. Subsequently, as much as she found the dolls fascinating, she scolds the protagonist because she actually came to visit him for his cosplay costumes, as she wants to place an order. He, embarrassed, reveals that his job is not to make cosplay costumes, because the Shizuku costume was a special request. She, disappointed, reminds him that he spied on her in the bathroom earlier without her permission, which means that if she files a complaint, he will be arrested. Furthermore, very distressed, she claims it's the first time anyone has seen her naked. For this reason, she demands that the protagonist make her a juju costume if he doesn't want to be arrested. Upon saying her cosplayer name, Wakana realizes she is a famous person on social media because he remembers Marin talking about her. He then asks how she found his house. She reveals that it was thanks to the photos uploaded by a girl named Marin, whose perfectly made costume caught her attention. Because of this, she attended the event where she was going to appear undercover, with the intention of seeing the costume in more detail, but after finding her, She realized that the person responsible for said costume was him, and because of this, she followed him to his house. Suddenly, while Wakana was still processing that she had followed him to his home without his consent, he received a message from Marin indicating that she will visit him soon because it seems she has already left work. So a few minutes later, Wakana takes it upon himself to introduce the girls to each other, although that wasn't necessary because Marin, very excited, showed that she knows everything about the great Juju, as she is clearly a huge fan of hers. The protagonist, for his part, tells Juju that he is with them thanks to seeing her photos dressed as Shizuku. This clearly made Marin very happy, who can't believe that one of the goddesses of cosplay has seen the photos on her new account. However, while she was pestering Juju, the famous cosplayer demands that she not get so close, because she is not interested in her, but came to meet Wakana. And after clarifying the situation, Juju tells the protagonist that she needs a Shion Nikaido costume as Black Lobelia. But since Wakana only has a vague idea about this character, as he doesn't really know the anime, both Marin and Juju quickly give him a report on everything he needed to know about Black Lobelia. So now, with the necessary information, the protagonist accepted the job, as Marin was also excited about it. She tries to convince Juju to coordinate their costumes, although she refused time and again. But everything changed when Marin offered to pay for half of the photography studio she was planning to use to take some good photos of Black Lobelia. Because of this, trying to hide her excitement about splitting the studio costs, she assures Marin that she will accept her proposal just this once. Therefore, with everything planned, Wakana tells Juju that he will now watch the entire Flower Princess Retsu anime, especially the parts where her character appears, as it is the best way to understand Black Lobelia, which in turn will allow him to choose the right fabric for her costume. She is amazed and can't believe what she is hearing. Usually, designers only use reference images. The next day, Wakana heads to Marin's house because she promised to lend him the DVDs containing all the episodes of Flower Princess Retsu. But upon arriving, he was shocked when she opened the door in her underwear, apologizing for having fallen asleep because she had clearly stayed up all night watching Retsu. Still, Wakana assures her that she doesn't have to worry and then gives her the gift he brought. However, as she goes to put away the puddings the protagonist gifted her, our boy tries not to vomit from the nerves of visiting a friend's house for the first time. Next, when he was planning to pick up the DVDs and leave quickly, everything changed when Marin suggested they watch the anime together, as this way he wouldn't have to go back home with so much weight. Therefore, she tells him that he can watch the anime in her room, which made our boy very nervous. Although, in reality, as the minutes passed, the one who was more nervous was Marin, as she begins to think that this encounter could be classified as a date at her crush's house, which leads her to imagine that perhaps this could be the day something happens between them. But everything went down the drain when her stomach once again embarrassed her by revealing she was hungry. Because of this, she tells the protagonist that she will prepare a delicious meal for both of them. Only after she finished cooking, she was met with a huge disappointment upon seeing that things did not turn out as she expected, as she had imagined preparing a perfect dish for her crush and was unable to do so. Wakana, upon tasting the food, made all her doubts disappear, as he considers it very delicious and assures her that he had never tasted anything like it, which obviously made Marin extremely happy, as she had worked very hard to prepare it. A few days later, we see that the protagonist sent Inui the final sketch of her costume, which she considers fantastic. Therefore, as there is nothing to correct, they both start talking about makeup and photography techniques. Thanks to this, the protagonist learned several very useful tips that he can use to help Marin, although what interests him most is being able to take good photographs. Because of this, he asks Inui to ask her sister, the one responsible for taking her photos, if she could teach him how to use the camera. She replies that her sister will surely have no problem, but she can't send her to his house because she is still in middle school and doesn't have permission to come back late. But Wakana assures her that this will not be a problem, as he will go visit them instead. Because of this, Inui proposes they meet at a restaurant near her house. And after agreeing to this meeting, the protagonist told Marin what he had arranged. Hearing this, she excitedly called him to let him know she plans to accompany him to meet Inui's sister. The next day, when they met with the Inui sisters, they were greatly surprised to meet Shinju, as she was not at all as they had imagined. Because unlike Sejuna, she is very tall and shy, and even more physically developed than her sister and Marin, which left both Wakana and his friend astonished. Next, we observe how Shinju is an expert with DSLR cameras, which allows her to speak like a professional about the different types of photography she can take with said camera. Both the protagonist and Marin were fascinated by the photography class she gave them. For that reason, they both agree that they should buy a camera. But upon researching how much a camera would cost, Wakana realizes that it would be almost impossible to buy one. Marin, far from worrying, assures him that he doesn't have to hurry, as for the moment he can continue using his cell phone until they can save enough for one. Finally, at the end of the meeting, before saying goodbye, Sajuna invited them to visit the photo studio with her, and since they both agreed to go, she tells them that she will be waiting for them over the weekend at Shimisato Station because the studio is in an abandoned hospital. A bit strange where this studio is located, to be honest. Subsequently, we see that the day to visit the abandoned hospital has arrived, but just minutes after entering, it began to rain, making the place even spookier. And while Marin was with Shinju, our protagonist noticed that Sajuna apparently does not like these types of places. Because of this, he tries to talk to her to offer his help, although Sajuna is only worried about maintaining her image and denies feeling scared by the darkness of the place. But thanks to Wakana's insistence, he managed to discover what Sajuna truly feels. She confesses that she makes an effort to visit places she dislikes because she wants to fulfill her long-held dream of becoming a magical girl, like in the animes, as they are strong, brave and radiant, and they also wear very cute clothes, which partly obsessed her when she was a child. The protagonist asks her why she chose him to make her costume when it is something so important to her, as he is aware that there must be many people with better skills for making cosplay costumes. Sajuna reveals that she did it because she felt jealous of Marin, and from that moment on, she decided she wanted to wear a costume made by the person who had made hers. Besides, she can't explain it well. She thinks she fell in love at first sight with the fabulous costume he made. Her answer reminded Wakana of what he felt the first time he saw his grandfather's Haina dolls. Therefore, bursting into tears, he thanks her for finally understanding how happy his grandfather was that day. Because of this, he promises that he will do his best to live up to her words. Days later, we observe Marin and the protagonist getting ready to start making her new costume. Although first, to Wakana's surprise, she shows him her new swimsuit without warning. Clearly, this made the protagonist very nervous, and he demands that she leave him alone for a moment. But Marin refuses and complains that the night before she sent him a photo showing the only swimsuit she had, as she needed his opinion. But he left her on red, which she considered quite rude. Our boy, who can't hide it anymore, was a little happy to see her underwear and once again demands to be left alone for a moment, while remembering everything that happened during the night after seeing her photo. Subsequently, after several days of work, both the protagonist and Marin met with Sajuna and Shinju, as Wakana needs her to try on her costume because it's the only way he has to find any possible defects. When Sajuna puts on the costume, she was fascinated because it fits perfectly, although she suggests to the protagonist that perhaps the skirt should be a little wider, which he plans to solve with a thick tutu. Then, upon using the cape her character must wear, she can't believe how much Wakana paid attention to the details, because he even used lined fabric for the lining of it, which makes it look very beautiful. Marin, upon hearing the great things Sajuna said about the protagonist's work, prepares to make similar comments about the costume he made for her, although no matter how hard she tried, she only managed to express how excited she is to wear a new costume made by his hands. Next, Wakana asks the girls to put on a lot of makeup and their very colorful wigs to be able to verify that all his work is in perfect order and that everything is clearly going perfectly. During the makeup time, Sajuna gave the two a crash course on how to do it correctly, as she has vast experience doing it. She also recommends that Marin use a light foundation for her face. Then apply blue or violet concealer to further highlight the features of her black lobelia character. But all that changed when the day came, because to their bad luck, it was a rainy day, which Sajuna considers beneficial because it's not hot and the sky's color is much better for photos. Although Marin doesn't think the same because she feels depressed on grey days, she still promises to do her best in the photo shoot. Then, a little embarrassed, she asks if they could take a picture together, and, as expected, Sajuna assures her that she can do whatever she wants because she will not object. Upon hearing her answer, Marin, very excited, took a selfie with the cosplayer she admires so much. And after several minutes of conversation between them, they realized that Wakana and Shinju were taking too long to prepare the scenery for the photos. Suddenly, the protagonist and Shinju return to apologize for the delay, although they cared little for their apologies because they are clearly fascinated seeing Shinju, who also decided to cosplay her favorite character named Soma. Next, because the studio rental fee is very expensive, our boy reminds them that they have to take the planned photos before it gets too late. Minutes later, we can observe the girls having a lot of fun taking said photos because they are all very happy with how great they look. Subsequently, Sajuna decides to speak with the protagonist alone, as she wants to thank him for helping her sister. She also assures him that she is aware that Shinju probably did not pay him properly for his work. Because of this, she will take care of what is still owed. He replies that she doesn't have to worry, as he did his work with great pleasure, knowing it wouldn't be profitable anyway, because he just wanted to allow Shinju to be happy doing what she loves most. Sajuna, upon hearing how kind and considerate Wakana is, was so fascinated because he also treated something she values very much with care. For that very reason, she thinks he is wonderful, but she still doesn't have the courage to tell him to his face. On the other hand, Marin continues to pose for Shinju, who happily takes many photos of her because she is fascinated by the way she is bringing the character to life. Later, the Inui sisters analyze the photos while sitting on their bed. They see how Marin is fantastically dressed as a cosplayer, while Sajuna begins to realize that she might be in love with Wakana because every time she sees him in photos, her heart races. Meanwhile, Marin and the protagonist talk on the phone about how the photos turned out. She also confesses to being surprised that he managed to prepare Shinju's costume without her realizing it. He reveals that they had been working at his house in secret for several days because Shinju was very embarrassed. Marin, upon hearing that they prepared the costume alone, started to get very jealous, although she tries to contain her anger so as not to reveal that Wakana is the man she is currently completely infatuated with because she clearly loves him. Several days later, we head to Wakana's home, who is very happy because summer vacation has arrived, which allows him to spend time with Marin and also sew a new costume for her. While in his free time, he can practice drawing Hina doll faces. We then discover that Marin's new costume is inspired by Veronica, a character from an anime he is watching once again with the protagonist, who is surprised that he was able to finish this costume quite quickly, though he thinks it might be because it was a simple design. Unlike the last jobs he had to do, Marin suddenly knocked on his door, and Wakana clearly hurries to let her in to prevent her from getting burned by the sun. But he was greatly surprised to see that Marin had a very dark skin tone, and, very worried, asks her what on earth she did to her skin. She, very happy, tells him that she decided to get a tan to be identical to Veronica. Our boy, a little annoyed, scolds her, saying it was an unnecessary decision. Because of this, Marin confesses that she is actually just using body makeup. She then begs the protagonist to let her use his shower because she sweated too much on the way and doesn't feel very comfortable. As expected, Wakana accepted her proposal without hesitation and, aware that she has no other clothes, tells her that he will leave some of his clothes on the other side of the door. Subsequently, we see that Marin has recovered her usual skin color, and while having a refreshing drink, she shows Wakana the makeup she was using. She also tells him that she bought everything necessary to look like Veronica. And not only that, but she also bought replaceable wallpaper with the intention of recreating the prison scene they saw in the anime. Therefore, everything is in place, and Marin asks the protagonist to help her apply makeup to her entire body. But as she starts to take off her clothes, it caused Wakana to turn very, very red, which made her think he might be suffering from heat stroke. However, while trying to help him, she ended up slipping and hitting her head against the wall, which means she can't wear a wig now because of it. So she decides to postpone the photoshoot transformed as Veronica. The next day, the two head to Shibuya, a city that makes the protagonist very nervous because he feels he clearly clashes too much with the people around him. Marin, smiling, asks him to stop being so silly and assures him that this thought is not true. She then took him to a men's clothing store, as she knows well that he only has traditional style clothing like what he usually wears. For this reason, she tells him that today they will spend their day looking for new clothes for him. Because of this, she will choose a couple of outfits for him to try on to look a little cooler. However, far from what she expected, she can't contain her excitement seeing how everything looks so good on Wakana and starts blushing. A lot, because she begins to think about how much she likes the protagonist at this moment. But after a long day of fun on the way to a well-known manga cafe, Wakana apologizes to Marin for not having bought anything she chose because he didn't feel comfortable at all in that type of clothing. She assures him that he doesn't have to worry, as they had a wonderful day together. She then reveals that her head is fine now, and she wants to know when they are going to try on the Veronica costume. Our boy, somewhat sorry, confesses that this time he will not accompany her to try on her costume because it has much less fabric in the chest area than the previous ones, which clearly makes him very nervous, and he wouldn't even be able to look at her. Marin, on the verge of tears, starts hitting him, complaining that she thought he was serious and that something bad had happened between them or something. So she assures him that next time she will look for a character that doesn't expose her body so much so that he doesn't get so nervous. Next, as she continued walking through Shibuya, She tells him that she will have to try on the Veronica costume alone, although to Wakana's surprise, she approached him to ask in a low voice if he wants her to send him a photo with the costume on. Obviously, this left the protagonist in shock, who turned as red as a tomato. Marin, laughing, confessed that she was just joking with him. They then enter a manga cafe that Marin knows very well. Wakana confesses that this is his first time in a place like this, to which she recommends visiting such places more often, because besides being cool, you can also read manga or eat something delicious. Minutes later, we discover that unlike Marin, who feels very comfortable in the manga cafe, our boy, for his part, gets very nervous because his friend is too close, and he starts to wonder why there is so little space in this place. Marin, noticing that he is a little uncomfortable, reveals that this situation is normal in a manga cafe, so she asks him to stop worrying. She then shows him a new slice of life manga, which she highly recommends, as she often uses it to fall asleep. This is because these types of manga are very peaceful, and only focus on the daily lives of the characters, which she finds extremely relaxing. She also reveals that she was clearly fascinated by Liz, a succubus who acts as a support for the manga's protagonist and has very adorable mini pigtails. Wakana, paying attention to what she says, asks if she would like to dress up as Liz, and she replies that she would love to, although she doesn't plan on it because she thinks the pigtails are too cute and wouldn't look good on someone with her style, as she is, unfortunately, not a cute girl. After hearing her, the protagonist tells her she is mistaken because he thinks they would look great on her. For that very reason, he encourages her to dress up as Liz if she really wants to. Marin, a little flushed, accepted his recommendation because she can't refuse after hearing him say that she will look cute with those pigtails. However, after she left to look for something to read, Wakana, after reading the manga where Liz appears, realized that they are in serious trouble, since unlike the costumes he has made so far, he only has simple drawings as a reference that do not clearly show the character's clothes, which means there will be many parts that will be a mystery, and they will have to use their imagination. A few days later, we observe Wakana being very nervous and sweating profusely in a love hotel. This is because Marin mistakenly rented a room thinking it was a very cheap photo studio where they could take some good pictures of the new costume the protagonist made. But as Marin starts to feel more and more comfortable in the love hotel, the very worried protagonist tells her that it is still a mistake and that it is not right for two minors to be in a place like this. She assures him that his words would be correct if they were normal people. But since they are not, she assures him that they will go change their clothes right now, because otherwise they will have just wasted their money. Subsequently, Marin entered the room's bathroom and upon discovering it has a jacuzzi with bubble baths, she gets very excited and asks Wakana to bathe with her. As one might expect, his proposal left the protagonist perplexed, who doesn't know what to answer. Because of this, she tells him she was just kidding and asks him to relax a bit. However, no matter how hard he tries, Wakana cannot relax for a single second, even when Marin isn't even around. For this reason, he resolves to convince himself by thinking it wouldn't be good to waste 6,000 yen. Although, since this didn't work, he thinks that clearly watching television will help him relax. Only when he turned on the TV, he remembered he was in a love hotel, which means the content broadcast would obviously be related to the activity that takes place in such places. Suddenly, Marin came out of the bathroom shouting excitedly because the costume he made for her is super cute, which left her speechless to describe how great his work is. She then sat next to him to look him in the eyes and tell him that all his costumes are always the best. Therefore, after praising the protagonist, she asks him to hurry up and start with the makeup before it gets late. Finally, after hard work, Wakana confesses to Marin that she looks beautiful with her mini pigtails. It even seems as if Liz has escaped from the manga into the real world. Because of this, he reveals that he marked certain scenes in the manga which he now wishes to photograph, and for that he bought some accessories. She, very excited, assures him that she will have no problem recreating all the scenes he wishes. But after taking many photos in which Marin looks fabulous, the critical moment of the day arrived. Because to recreate the last memorable scene of the manga, she must get on top of Wakana, who innocently only thinks about taking the photo. Marin, for her part, after getting the photo of both of them they longed for and without getting off Wakana, confesses that she has a lot of fun with him, to which the protagonist reveals that he feels the same. However, their moment of happiness is interrupted by strange noises coming from the other room. These made Wakana remember that he is in a love hotel and, in turn, caused him to blush upon realizing that he had asked Marin to get on his lap. Therefore, very worried, he asks her to get off before it's too late. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't, which led to Marin discovering a part of him she had never known. Because of this, both very embarrassed, they remained silent in the dark, listening to the strange noises from the other room. Little by little, they begin to let themselves be carried away by their most intimate desires. Although before they could kiss for the first time, they were interrupted by a call from the receptionist who informs them that their time is up. In this situation, both very nervous and unable to look each other in the face, they prepare to gather everything to leave the Love Hotel. Later, we see Wakana unable to easily get what he just experienced with Marin out of his head, and so he tries to relax in any way he can before sleeping. A few days later, while Wakana was painting the faces of his Hina dolls, he received a message from Marin, urgently requesting his help. Therefore, without hesitation, he went to her house, and there he discovered that she needed a little help with her pending school assignments. She also confesses that she was very sad and needed to talk to him. As expected, the protagonist asks her what happened, and she tells him that she is sad because of her father, who cancelled their plan to visit a festival they had clearly planned to go to together. Wakana assures her that it's a shame she can't attend the festival, although now he wants to know why her father changed his mind. Marin, very nonchalantly, indicates that it's simply because he's an ogre who doesn't trust her and doesn't believe she'll catch up with her homework in just 2 weeks. For this reason, he now forces her to send daily progress photos to know that she is working. The protagonist, thinking about the plans for her next costume, tells her that during the night he saw fireworks being set off in Iwatsuki from his window. This angered Marin, who reproaches him for not inviting her to see them together, to which he replied that he didn't because she had pending homework. Faced with his blunt response, Marin couldn't argue with him, and then assures him that she accumulated so much homework because she had been working a lot. Taking advantage of her bringing up the topic, Wakana asks her what she really works as, and to his surprise, Marin shows him one of the magazines where she works as an amateur model. Our fascinated boy wants to know how she started her modeling career. She reminds him that it is thanks to a magazine editor who often visits the beauty salons she frequents, who, believing in her potential, has recently been allowing her to appear in the magazine a little more than the other models. Still amazed by her beauty, Wakana confesses that in these photos, he feels they have a different vibe than when she dresses up as her favorite characters. Marin thinks that perhaps it's because of the type of makeup they use. She then reveals that she is working twice as hard just to buy the single-lens reflex camera they both long for. Subsequently, after a few hours of doing homework, she suggests to the protagonist that they take a break and watch a horror movie together, which Wakana accepted without hesitation, although he confesses that he doesn't usually watch many horror movies. For this reason, he wants to know how scary this one was. Marin smiles and assures him that he has nothing to worry about, because it's just a movie and it won't be that bad. However, minutes after the movie starts, we can see that she is terrified, while not a single hair on the protagonist moves. Because of this, she tries to hide what she feels so that he clearly won't make fun of her. At the end of the movie, Wakana was fascinated with it, while Marin, after suffering for a while, indicates that, just as she thought, it wasn't that scary. Next, we observe that after much effort, Marin managed to finish her English homework, but when she was celebrating, Wakana tells her that she still has math left. Upon hearing him, she assures him that she had no idea about this assignment. Because of this, she realizes that she might have forgotten it at school, and in this situation, they both decide to head there with the intention of finding it. And after succeeding, as they walk through the deserted school hallways, the protagonist invited Marin to have dinner at his house, which she clearly accepted, as they haven't had dinner together in a long time. Next, as they were about to leave the school, Marin noticed that the swimming club's pool was open. For this reason, she tells Wakana that they should take a dip. However, as soon as she got close to the pool, Marin fell into the water, and since she doesn't know how to swim, she began to sink more and more. In this situation, Wakana had no choice but to jump into the water to save her life. As a thank you, she reveals that she has thought they should go to the end-of-year festival together, and our boy accepts her proposal, but with one condition, that she finishes her homework first. A few days later, while Wakana was calmly practicing with the faces of the Hina dolls, he received a message from Marin, who happily tells him that she has already finished her math homework. So now we see the protagonist keeping his word and heading to the festival where he will meet Marin. Subsequently, after waiting a few minutes for her to find him, we observe the surprised look on Wakana's face when he notices that Marin is exceedingly beautiful wearing her yukata. She tells him that she paid to have it put on and also found someone to do her hair, as she wanted to look very good. Meanwhile, Wakana can only look at her with a dazed expression, because he can't help but feel captivated by her beauty when wearing traditional clothes. Marin, noticing this, becomes very happy and is thankful for having made the decision to wear a yukata. Hours later, after getting some food, the two hear over the loudspeaker that the fireworks will soon be launched. Therefore, they hurry to find a place from where they can best appreciate them. Along the way, the protagonist confesses that it will be the first time he sees them from so close, and Marin regrets that this is the case because they are actually very close to her house. Next, we observe the two admiring the fireworks, while Wakana thinks about how different everything feels seeing it from so close, because now the noise resonates throughout his body. Finally, when the festival was over, we can see that Wakana had to carry Marin on his back. Because of this, she couldn't walk back home, as her feet were sore from so much walking. And although she is not too heavy, our boy suffered during the walk because imagining they looked like a couple made him uncomfortable feeling Marin's body so close to his. And so the anime ends.